so I just want to do it.
Okay. Well, the recording has started, and I have not recorded the Quail Springs blurb, but for if you want to find out more about Quail Springs, it's our information is on our website at quailsprings.org. Um, and I will handle or hand it over to Sasha to introduce yourself.
Wow. Hi, everyone. I will also say that I have rural internet. I'm not at Quail Springs right now, but also have rural internet. So if my internet glitches, I can switch over to my phone hotspot. So please, someone just let me know if it does. And I'm just seeing as people hop on here. I might just take one moment as people are still joining us. If you got it, Bill, that's exactly what I was about to ask for. If folks wanted to just like write in the chat where they're joining us from, sort of take a moment to do that just while people are chiming in. I think it would be interesting to see like, are we mostly LA here or all over the place or um um cool, lots of Southern California. Oh, some familiar names out there. Sweet. Okay. Wow. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Cool. Mendocino, me too. And some all over the place. Okay. That's kind of, I don't know. This is such an interesting format of being all together in this online weird way that it's nice to know a little bit of where people are. So, welcome. Thanks, Quail Springs, for hosting us. Thanks, Ben, for joining us here. I'm going to start, like Donnie mentioned, we're just going to, Ben and I are each going to do just like a short presentation and then we have some questions that we've come up with, and then there'll be time for some of you to ask questions too. Obviously not everyone, but Teddy will be going through the questions and she'll pick out sort of the ones that are maybe feel most relevant. So um, I want to start with just saying like, my background is in earth and building, primarily Cobb, primarily at Quail Springs. I've been doing in this work for about 20 years and really kind of started off like backwoods, just building buildings. And then after maybe a decade of doing that and teaching classes, kind of was like, wow, it's still really very few people are actually still living in these buildings. Like, how do we change that? And so um, from there, I got more uh, into more like the policy, the codes, the seismic testing, fire testing, sort of really trying to look at like what are our biggest hurdles in this movement. And so I'd say in the last 5, 8 years, my work has become a lot more policy um, related. But I am not a fire expert. So I just want to say that first thing. My expertise is really primarily in the earth and building side of things, and in these times, I have gotten kind of thrust into also the like fire safety elements of that. But yeah, just want to be really clear that like that's I do not claim to be an expert on that. So I'm just going to share a few photos here. Maybe just like a tiny bit more of my background. I am the Quail Springs Natural Building Advocacy Director, and I lived at Quail Springs for 10 years. And I'm not the most technically savvy here, so I'm trying to talk and share my screen. Okay. Um, and now I live up in Mendocino County, but I'm still the Quail Springs Natural Building Advocacy Director. So in these recent, just in light of the recent fires, we have sort of dove back in full force to just respond to all the surge of interest in all these things and hopefully take some of this momentum that's created and funnel it into places that we feel like are worthy places for this excitement and energy around these systems to go. So I'm just going to share a few images from Quail Springs. This was the house that I built and lived in. And mostly all out of earth, mostly all earth from the site there. And variety of different techniques. There's our shower house out at Quail Springs. Again, it's all built out of earth from the site. The shower is sealed with a method called Tadillac. I just wanted to share a few visuals with you. I am not getting into like all the details of what these systems are, but we do have a ton of resources at the end and blog posts and stuff to point you all in those directions. So I apologize if I'm just like diving in and assuming that folks maybe know some of these things, but I really do want to get into just sort of the other content here. So yeah. So this is one of the offices at Quail Springs. And again, it's a cob building, which is all earth from the site there. And Quail Springs is just really lucky and unusual in that there's beautiful both sand and clay for building with cob, which is a huge part of the reason why we chose those wall systems in that place. So another, I think my other question, if we had less people here and more time, my other question for you all would be like, who's just heard of natural building over the last, month and or two? Which is super exciting that so many people are newly just interested in these things. And one of the paths that we've sort of gone down is just looking at like risks and just looking at risks from a different perspective and like kind of stepping back and looking at risk assessment in different ways. So this is a graph that Art Ludwig did, and you can see sort of to, not, so I'm just, you can see in this chart how waterborne disease, house fire, structural collapse really declined, right? Thank you, building codes, that they really actually addressed some of these major hazards. And what building codes, so building codes are, our building codes did a great job of that. What they do not do a great job of is changing rapidly in response to our rapidly changing world. And so what you see on this side is some lines on the graph that are going up. And I'm going to focus here on the bottom one, that's California firestorms. So firestorms are drastically going up, and our building codes are not, they're not changing fast enough to reflect that. I mean, there are some great codes, and I think that Ben will talk more about that, but like the wildland urban interface, there are some there, but it's an area we need to do better. So here's another just perspective, another way to look at things. This is a graph made by David Eisenberg, and sort of this middle circle is the things that our codes, it's overly simplified, so I'll just say that, but that our codes do take into account, right? Like fire safety, structural integrity, means of egress, light, ventilation, heat, water and wastewater, electrical gas, energy efficiency. And then on the outside is all of these things that that they don't take into account, right? Like pollution and toxicity of materials and risk to our future generations and all these things. And I'm sure this list could be longer, but just in throwing this out there as a context in which to think a little broader about some of our the risks, the idea of safety, really. It's a broader idea of what is safe, right? So the other piece that I just want to bring into the equation is when we're talking about safety and what is safety is that, sorry, I'm just realizing that I drew a green line in the middle of my screen. I don't know if you all can see that. I have no idea how I did that. I've never done it before, and it's showing up on every slide. Oh well. So the other part of our, risk and hazards is not having a home at all. And in some ways, all of the roadblocks and the all the regulations and everything have made it very hard and expensive to build a home. And while I am all for safety in all the ways, and I'm not a proponent of people just going and doing it, it's like I would still feel better about somebody living in a little cob house in a seismic zone would be safer than living in a tent. So yeah, again, just to sort of broaden our perspective of safety and what, what is safe and what is, what are we, what are we aiming towards here? So I know that what you guys all came for was to talk about fire, but so we know that these wall systems are not combustible. That is, we know that. We have been building ovens and fireplaces and cook stoves with earthen materials for thousands of years. Beyond that, we all just know with common sense that that earth does not burn. And so it's not the walls that are of concern when we're talking about fire safety. It's the detailing, right? If you can have walls that don't burn, but still have a house that's rendered uninhabitable after a fire. So we'll talk more about that. But we did, in 2001, my partner John and I went to Texas and we built two walls and we did a ASTM E119 test on these two cob walls. And it's like the industry standard of doing a fire rating test. And we don't actually need an ASTM test for most of what cob is used for, and Ben might be able to offer more nuanced detail there. But my understanding is that it's more for commercial buildings, a wall in a duplex, for example, so you don't burn your neighbor's house down. Mostly things cob is not going to be used for, but it's a talking point. It's industry accepted test that we can now say it's not, cob has a 2-hour fire rating. So here's the wall we built. And basically what happens is it gets blasted with heat on one side. You can all see the green line now, and I'm not going to try to delete it because I'm just going to make it worse. um, anyway, okay, I'll just keep going here. The wall gets blasted with 2,000-degree heat on one side for 2 hours. And then the wall actually gets lifted up, rotated, and blasted with a fire hose for 2 minutes. And so we knew that the heat part of the test would be fine. And then but we didn't know how the fire hose part would be. But it passed. So it did great. And so the other biggest just challenge with working with these earthen building systems is the lack of seismic testing. And um, this is a seismic test we did with two Cal Poly grad students and a engineering professor out there a number of years back. And the data that we gleaned from this test is what went into the Cobb code. So, but so much more is needed. So if you know of anyone who has a couple $1 million to invest in some seismic testing of earthen walls, we know where to spend it. So let me know. Um, so one of the, questions that I'm getting a lot is like, can we rebuild with Cobb and what can we do? And so I've just sort of been spending time putting time into like, well, what ways can we use Cobb in LA right now? So this is probably a photo that probably a lot of you have seen going around. Like, why did this house survive and all the ones around it didn't? And one thing I'm hearing a lot about, and again, not a fire expert, but one thing that I am hearing people mention a lot is this idea of like walls around a house and a cinder block wall around a house to sort of block some of the like, flame infiltration. And that is something that could totally be done with Cobb, no problem. I forgot to look up LA County, but I know Ventura County, you can build a masonry wall up to 5 feet without getting a permit. So a wall, and I'm not exactly sure what LA is, but most likely you could build a wall like this out of Cobb instead of concrete. So that's one thing. I also have a few images here of other type buildings. So this is a straw bale building, and people tend to not think of straw as being super like, fire resistant. But if the walls are sealed well and the detailing is done well, it can be extremely fire safe building. This building is from a Mendocino County fire some years back, and this man and his neighbor couldn't get out. They woke up in the middle of the night and it was covered in, flames everywhere. And they survived inside the house, and the fire burned all the way around them. So yeah, just putting that out there that to broaden our conversation from not just being like cob earthen materials, but there's other building systems like um primarily straw and hemp that can also be quite fire resistant. And also just like we can also have a house that the walls survive. This is a straw house, but those could be cob walls where the walls don't burn, but the house is still completely gone. So yeah, just that as well. And then I know there's so much talk right now too. And again, and also I'm not an expert in like the toxic element of these things, but I think that the other kind of lower hanging fruit when we're talking about the rebuilding is just how do we rebuild with less toxic materials? And so you know, if, God forbid, our houses do burn again, how do we have buildings that don't have as much toxic materials? And how do we build buildings that can just sort of deteriorate and erode and give back right into the earth from where they came, whether they burn or whether they melt back in, and not to be, yeah, filling our landfills or our um, atmosphere with toxic materials. So, um, yeah, that's that was a little bit of a whirlwind. Sorry about the green stripe there. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Ben. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Sasha. Okay, let's see here. How about that? Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So I'm Ben Loescher, architect with a life that's divided in many ways between
Hi, Ben. I'm wondering if you can up your volume a little bit. You're sounding a little far away and low.
let's see.
I could actually hear him fine.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have any options here, so I'm just going to enunciate and project. I'll use my theatrical voice. Um, so, architect here in Los Angeles and often in greater Joshua Tree, Pioneer Town specifically. And got kind of two lives I'm trying to balance in some way. Like one is with Loescher Meachem Architects. That's my firm with a bunch of other people here in Los Angeles that mostly does kind of conventional architecture. We upcycle um, existing buildings, do adaptive reuse, try and squeeze every last year of utility out of buildings that we've already built. For all kinds of different clients, film, television, advertising, whatever, all kinds of stuff with an eye towards sustainability. And then we've got this other part of our work, which is mostly based out of Pioneer Town called Adobeisnotsoftware. And this is like the education and advocacy wing of our firm, specifically around building code reform, education, and enabling earthen masonry, and specifically Adobe, to be used in California. And it's a long story, but like I had a little bit of a you know crisis. My normal job when I was like doing tech company headquarters and that kind of stuff, and flaked out and moved to New Mexico, as one does, and picked up the earthen bug there. But Adobeisnotsoftware, we put on classes. We do building code advocacy, work with folks like Sasha and Anthony Dente and David Eisenberg and Martin Hammer, all these names that you guys have probably heard at the national and local level to try and reform earthen building codes so that they're more appropriate, better informed. We're dealing with a lot of legacy information on all of these things, and it's an effort both to take the information that we've got and use it to update the codes, as well as to try and stimulate the research that we need to create new information to inform these standards. So anyway, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the nuts and bolts of this, right? So how do we build using these so-called natural materials? Told Sasha, I have all kinds of trouble with that term because I come from a liberal arts background, and nature is a social construct, and it means different things to different people, and all that stuff. But we're all still talking about the same materials, right? Like low processed, local materials that can be obtained on site, or biomaterials that are like locally harvested, all as a way of making buildings that have less impact on the world, and hopefully can be returned back to where they came from with very little impact at the end of the building's life cycle, right? So, the short question a lot of people have been asking is like, hey, what can be built in Los Angeles County easily? I have this, glib throwaway thing that I say, it's like, the world, everything that we do in our lives, everything that we can even really imagine, but all of our activities are governed by this invisible force. And, it's almost spiritual, but it's not, because it's called regulation. And building regulation is a thing that shapes so much of our lives. It's sort of it's inescapable. And like it or not, we have to work within these regimes if we're going to be successful in building. So what can be built in Los Angeles County easily? And once you depart from conventional construction, stick framing, softwood lumber, the list gets short. Straw bale is one. So Los Angeles County has adopted the straw bale appendix. That's a huge thing. It actually is a great opportunity to build sustainably. And not a lot of people have taken advantage of this, I think. Interior earthen plasters, super easy, not very heavily regulated. That's a great option. Exterior lime plasters. If you call this out on your drawings, you might get a raised eyebrow from your building official or something like that. But effectively, this goes, it's applied much like the Portland cement stuccos that everybody is familiar with, and nobody is going to care if you swap it out. But that's a short list, right? So that was the easy stuff. What isn't specifically allowed by code, but is still possible with some grit, okay? If you guys are motivated and want to do it. Light straw clay, that's one. So there's an appendix for light straw clay that now exists in the International Residential Code. And you will find it in your California Residential Code binder, but it has not been adopted in Los Angeles County or by the state of California. Hemp lime, same thing. The standards are there. They're just not adopted by the state of the county. Cob, monolithic adobe, same deal. And what's in the code but hard to use? This is where my stuff comes in. So Adobe brick, there is a section in the California Building Code 2109 for Adobe masonry. It's just really hard to use. Even if you're a licensed professional or a structural engineer, it has a lot of language which hasn't been updated in a long time for reasons that we might talk about later. But if you go down this path in a seismic area, you'll quickly run into a bunch of questions that are hard to answer, and oftentimes problems of interpretation on what those words mean and what the precise methodology is supposed to be between the structural engineer and the plan reviewer. What's adjacent to the code, but even harder to use? So, level of difficulty, like going yet higher. Compressed earth block, this is like a family member to Adobe, right? And in many cases, it's designed exactly the same way. It may even outperform Adobe from a strength standpoint, but the challenge is that the word compressed earth block doesn't occur in the building code. There are some standards like moisture resistance that don't really make sense. for stabilized blocks, for compressed earth block. So just makes it a little bit harder again. And then if we keep going, Super Adobe, this one has the word Super Adobe doesn't occur in the code anywhere. The folks at CalEarth have gotten an ICC-ES report that basically provides a methodology for using the Adobe provisions, but then you're going back to those same Adobe provisions that are kind of hard to use, with the additional complication that conventional reinforcing is really hard to do with Super Adobe. And then this table is just for your information. You know, it's sort of a matrix that shows what all these different technologies are: straw bale, hemp lime, cob, light straw clay, Adobe. I include the tiny home appendix in here, but it just shows you by jurisdiction who's adopted what. And, you know, short version, you don't have to read the whole thing. Almost no one has adopted any of it. More on that later, because you can be a part of getting that fixed. Can I build stuff that isn't in the code? Yes. So it is impossible actually for a building official to simply tell you, no, you can't use any material. It's a restraint of trade, and the building code in the first chapter of every volume includes this section on alternative materials, design and methods of construction and equipment. And what this provision gives you is an opportunity to use anything as long as you can prove to the building official that it is giving equivalent performance, structural, durability, fire resistance, safety, all of that stuff as the things that are within the code. So this gets used a lot in alternative building. This is the advanced level. You know, like most of the time to succeed at this in California, at least, you're going to need the help of architect or structural engineer. But this is really important to know about because it's in the Bible. Is there stuff that I can build without a permit? Yes. In Los Angeles County and in most jurisdictions in California, there's a bunch of things that are specifically excluded from permit requirements. So that's, you might have heard about this, 120 square foot accessory building. That language is in this section. So what LA County says is that no building permit is required for one-story detached accessory buildings used as a tool and storage shed, shade structure, pump house, similar uses, provided the gross floor area does not exceed 120 square feet. And then there's height limitations and roof projection stuff. Now, you'll notice that this is not a dwelling, right? And that's really important. These are utility structures, so they're not supposed to be something that people are living in or sleeping in because there's a lot higher hazards associated with that. But it does allow you to create an outbuilding out of alternative materials with some caveats. Fences, masonry fences, as Sasha mentioned, not exceeding 6 feet in height, and then are, in this case, LA County set back from the public way a distance at least equal to the fence height. Doesn't require a permit. They don't want it, if it falls over, they don't want it to fall on someone's like dog walker or whatever. And these things will buy you some opportunities, but it's important to note that it doesn't get you out of code compliance. And this is often forgotten. So you see here in the bottom, exemption from the permit requirements of this code shall not be deemed to grant authorization for any work to be done in any manner in violation of the provisions of this code, et cetera, et cetera. So even if you don't get a permit, they're expecting you to build to permit standards. And that means for things like cob, they really want you to be using reinforcing and that sort of stuff when it's required for structures. So keep an eye on that. This other clause above it, unless otherwise exempted, separate plumbing, electrical, and mechanical permits will be required for the above exempted items. And this is where things get hung up sometimes. People will build a Cobb or Adobe outbuilding, you know, that's exempt from permit, but then expect to use it as a writing studio or something like that and bring in electrical. And that's when the building officials get mad because it speaks to a type of occupation that would not be exempt. Other stuff here, standard plans. There's been a lot of talk about this in with respect to rebuilding in Altadena. And what that is a sort of pre-approved plan so that a design that's already been created, already been vetted by the building department, can be used on more than one site and not have to relitigate all those building code issues. So that can be a really great thing for lowering the barriers to building. We all know that lots of time and money gets spent in plan check and at building departments. So pre-approved plans are one good way around it. You still have to do site-specific information like site plan, Title 24 energy compliance stuff, but this still makes things a lot easier. These standard plans do not allow modification except for mirroring and changes in orientation. In LA County, the program is restricted currently only to ADUs, so not primary homes or residences. And right now, the only ones that are in the catalog are of frame construction. There is a theory, you know, that we're trying to prove out with LA County that some of these unconventional, you know, so-called alternative building materials might be eligible for creating standard plans. And, you know, we heard maybe, you know, back from LA County. So I don't think that they're of the mind right now to be saying no explicitly, but you know, we're looking at going down this road, and the expectation is it's going to be a very high bar in order to get these through. But it may be an option, and the county does intend to expand this program to include single-family homes. Yeah, so inevitably, how do we get better codes? You know, we focus a lot on what's happening locally, but I will tell you from experience and lots of failure at the local level and success at the national level, that it is often quite a bit easier to change the building code for the entire United States than to get the permit for one building of alternative construction in California. That's a bummer, but that's real. And it does speak to where we should be putting our efforts in a lot of this stuff. You know, the way that I look at this is that our local jurisdiction, that's sort of entry level. This is like where we're talking about focusing our attention, trying to get, you know, County of Los Angeles Public Works to allow this stuff. But they're not, this is level one, right? That's the beginner stuff. And if we succeed in LA County, the impact will be in LA County. It won't matter in City of Los Angeles. It won't matter in Santa Monica. It won't matter in Ventura. If we want to have that kind of impact, we need to be working at the state level. And that's with the Building Standards Commission. State of California adopts building codes every 3 years, and they're about to do it next month. And I will guarantee you that they are not going to approve any of these IRC appendices, but what a great opportunity when they have this hearing for everyone to remind them that they ought to be, because it is a public hearing. It's going to be held here in Los Angeles, and usually they allow remote participation. So stay tuned. I'll share information on that back with Sasha and Quail Springs, and then you'll also see it on our website. But we're intending to show up and talk about, you know, why we need a larger perspective and maybe should be reconsidering some of these codes. And then the mega boss, the one that really matters is the International Code Council. So again, every 3 years, codes are proposed for a revision, modification, addition at the national level. These always trickle down to these two lower levels. And a lot of the time, especially if you're working within the body of the code and not within the appendices, it will sail right through without any of the local jurisdictions noticing that something, sustainable has been added without anyone objecting. So this is a really good place to do your work. It's pretty sophisticated. I encourage everybody to give your financial support to organizations like CASBA, Cobb Research Institute, the Earth Builders Guild, Earthen Construction Initiative, Natural Building Alliance. I'm going to forget a bunch of them, but these are the folks that are showing up and doing this work. Makes a big difference. And then what happens? Are we done at that point when we've got building codes that work for our materials? Not so much. Because if we want to have impact at a large scale, whether it's within Los Angeles or in our own communities, we have to grapple with the fact that we actually don't have the human and kind of economic infrastructure to build a lot of these buildings at scale. Sasha and I were talking about this earlier today. It's like, well, we could do a couple, but there's a lot of things that go into it besides the codes. And the analogy that I've been using is this one. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's a four-legged stool, right? We need to have builders that know how to work with these materials. We need to have architects and engineers that are fluent in them and understand the codes. Of course, we need to have responsible and informed building regulation. We need to have trade associations that will advocate for them, which is the whole reason why Adobe has been so neglected and the code provisions are antiquated. There was no one professionally that was advocating for them. And it turns out, maybe it's a five-legged stool. We also need material suppliers, because it's a hard thing. Like, where are you getting your hemp hurd? Where are you getting your Adobe bricks? All of that stuff. So now this is starting to get to be an awkward piece of furniture. But there's one more. We also need consumers, right? So now it's a six-legged stool. Without people that want this stuff, and I think that's some of the folks that are on here, none of these other things work. All six of these are interrelated, kind of require each other for reinforcement, to pay for their work, all of that stuff. So you can see how complex this can get. But I encourage everyone, as they're getting into these materials, to think about what part you play in this and who are your allies. They're going to fill in the rest of the picture, because you're not going to do it by yourself. Finally, related to the code reform thing, you guys might have seen this. So there's a bunch of kind of parallel petitions that are going out right now about these issues. Sign all of them. This one in particular, we helped put together with a bunch of other organizations, but it's asking the Building Standards Commission to not do what I told you that they were going to do, to adopt these IRC appendices for cob, light straw clay, hemp, lime, forgetting one, so that it's easier for all of us to use them at the local level. Honestly, I don't think it's going to happen next month, but we're in a climate right now where I think that the state legislature, as well as these regulators, are going to find themselves, under a lot of pressure, and also maybe, with a broadened perspective about the risks that Sasha was talking about, and maybe looking to enable some of these materials that will not just help harden buildings against fires, but also not provide additional fuel to them. That was a unique thing about these two fires. It wasn't just a wildfire, it was a conflagration, which is the type of fire where the buildings themselves are the fuel that is adding to the intensity of the fire. That's like a 19th century thing. So a very, very new problem that is, caused by plastics and wood construction. So if you wouldn't mind, sign this as well as the other ones. And hopefully we'll make it easier later.
Wow, thank you so much, Ben. I feel like you just answered a lot of the panel discussion questions that I had, so it's great. Just one thing, is it possible for your camera to be tilted more to your face? There's a request for accessibility. Thank you. And yeah,
I'll say it's
Sasha,
unique for anyone actually to want to see my face, but yes, happy to accommodate.
yeah, people have been asking to hear your voice and see your face. They can't. Um, yeah, Sasha, I'll just leave room for you if you have anything to add in addition to what Ben shared.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts here. One, Ben, there were a few questions about when is the public hearing?
Yeah, I believe it's towards the end of March. I don't remember off the top of my
Okay.
head. Yeah, it's about 4 days long, and there's going to be a little bit of strategy around when to show up.
And yeah, if we have time and if folks are interested in that, I can speak a little bit more to the work we've been doing around trying to encourage states to adopt the different codes. I guess technically lobbying. I didn't really realize that when I got into it, but that's what I've been up to. Oh, something else I just want to mention was that I feel like I'm just like reading through people's comments while Ben was talking, and I feel like we could add like 20 more legs to that stool in terms of like just people sharing some of their different skill sets, like filmmakers, the storytellers, the all these things. And so one of the big just things that's coming up right now is like where do we all connect around all this? How do we move this forward? So I put a call out on Instagram a month or so ago that was like, we need a database. And someone reached out to me that was like, I have one started. Will you help me with it? And so we've been working on it. It's still in the sort of like, there's only a handful of people that have signed up for it, but I'm going to post it here and sign up. If there isn't a category that feels fitting for you, let me know. You can either send feedback. You can send it either through the website. His name is Nate, and he'll receive that, or you can send me messages. I've been receiving messages via Instagram about people's feedback on it and just forwarding it to him. So that's one maybe hopeful, very far from perfect tool that can maybe help people connect and know who's out there. So I'll just post it here, and it'll also be and again, it's still in the like beta testing stage, but hopefully we'll launch it publicly on March 1st. But feel free to sign up, create a profile, give us your feedback. I have a lot more I can say, but Donnie, do you have specific questions you would like to? You're muted.
thank you. I'm also reading the chat box. I guess Ben shared a little bit about this, but one of the questions is, what are some of the biggest challenges of scaling up these building systems, and are there ways that this can be done?
Well, I'm sure Ben has a lot to say about this too, but I can chime in here. I feel like, one interesting thing is like I hear people like, no, not promoting that. Like we need to promote hempcrete or not this. And it's like, we need all of it. There are literally, even if, 5% of the people who have lost their homes decided they wanted to build out of natural materials, we are going to be hard pressed to find designers, architects, builders, all the things to get the materials, like all the things to get those houses built. So all of it, like not, and yeah, I don't know. I just maybe to to really emphasize that and not getting too stuck on like one thing being the solution. Because we truly don't have the like skill set right now to scale up very much. I think one exciting potential that's floating around is an idea of some, we're not there yet, but this idea of like a prefab straw wall panels. And there's some companies around the country. There's a company in Vermont called New Frameworks that does beautiful, really amazing carbon storing buildings that are built in a warehouse. And if we had something like that on the West Coast right now, we could like scale up production to like have them ready for folks. Verdant structural engineers Anthony Dente, who you heard Ben mention too, they have a product they're working on called the Verdant Panel. They're looking for investors. They're also a straw panel manufacturing company. And yes, I see someone saying there's hemp prefab panels. There's none. I don't know of any production in California yet, but so that's one potential option. And the one kind of interesting thing to note is that and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure what I have heard is that the city of LA is allowing people to rebuild ADUs first, which feels a little bit more accessible in terms of utilizing some of these other materials, because normally you have to have your main, ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, so it's sorry, it is accessory to the main building. So you have to have the main building first, but now they're allowing people to do that smaller structure first, which feels a little more, attainable to me to use some of these other alternative materials. Ben?
Yeah, I think I've heard that as well, and I expect that that'll be true for City of Los Angeles as well. They're trying to find ways to get people back on site as quickly as possible. So I'm sure that'll happen in both jurisdictions.
Thank you. There's just general curiosity about seismic tests and like safety, and also about cob wall temperature and how well they withstand wildfires. Not sure. Yeah, maybe Sasha, you could speak to that.
Sure. Yeah, I think I spoke to this a tiny bit, but like it's all in the detailing. Like you could build a cob house that um everything except for the cob walls burn in a fire. There's some examples at the Ojai Foundation from the Thomas Fire and of buildings that were, unusable after the fire. The walls themselves didn't burn, but the roof burns out, the windows burn out. There's nothing like useful. You can't inhabit that building anymore. So it truly is about all of the detailing. And that detailing is really well thought through and well done in the like what's called the WUI standards, the Wildland Urban Interface, for people in the areas where you are at higher fire risk on the edge of the urban and the wild, that interface where there's different standards there for how you're supposed to build. So those are good standards. And then there's so many details that people can get into that I don't need to totally get into right now. But yeah, you can build a cob house that fails in a fire. You can build a cob house that does really well in a fire. And one could say that about a myriad of different wall systems. But it's not just the walls that we need to build so that they don't burn. It's the whole house. Was there another part to the question or?
Well, there were several questions. Someone asked like specifically about whether Adobe can be made seismically strong enough.
I'll leave that one to Ben.
Yeah, yeah. Great question. I mean, the short answer is yes. The methodology is not in the building code, but what we've been doing in San Bernardino County on the buildings that we've been getting permitted is using a post-tensioning system. So one of the problems with like earthen materials and rebar is they don't bond very well together. And that's like really important for getting the composite action that which is the whole reason that you use reinforcing, right? So you've got a masonry material, earth, that's strong in compression, and a steel material that's strong in tension. And if you can bond them together, then you get the best of both. That's what happens in concrete. It doesn't happen very well in earthen materials. So what we've been doing, and this was an idea that was stolen from precast concrete construction, is using threaded rods that are post-tensioned or pre-compressed, however you want to look at it. They don't require bonding between the earthen material and the reinforcing. So we're basically just putting a big compressive force on the wall from above, and that helps it stay in place and resist out of plane forces, like, that are what usually destroy masonry buildings. So it can definitely be done. The work that we're doing with Verdant and Dr. Michele Barbato from UC Davis, a number of other structural engineers from all over the country, is just to prove that out in a national standard, so that can be used everywhere and find its way into the code. We just got, give us like 6 to 9 years because we have to convince people, but we do know that it works.
Ben, would you say, if you were to say, like, if someone's like, okay, I don't want to, so historically LA County is one of the most rigorous building areas, and it has, some of the highest seismic zones, so that makes sense. If someone's like, okay, I don't want to be like the first person to build a permitted cob house and spend the next like 5 years trying to like fight that fight, what would you say would be like the most accessible natural, like bio-based wall systems that might be more accessible and less of an uphill battle?
I think the easiest, like the most bang for your buck, could probably be achieved by doing conventional frame construction, and then instead of using fiberglass insulation, use light straw clay in the stud bays, hemp lime on the exterior for continuous insulation, and then maybe a lime plaster over the top of that. That doesn't seem to me to be like a heavy lift. There are still some boxes to check with the regulators, but I think structural would sort of be off the table as a problem. That's usually where they're most conservative, and all the other stuff I think they'll be able to imagine working.
Cool. I'd agree. That's probably would have been my answer too. So
I have something worth mentioning. I mentioned it on the chat. Basically, when I spoke with, and hi everyone who's here. There's a lot of folks on this call, so hi.
Hi, Bernard.
But when I spoke with Nader Khalili, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, but since we're such a big group, we're asking folks to put their questions down in the chat. And if you have things you want to share, to also put it in the chat, since there are a lot of questions for Sasha and Ben. So we appreciate that, since we only have like half an hour.
I'm super stoked to see all the like ideas and networking and stuff that's going on in the chat too. It's awesome.
Yeah, we encourage folks to keep connecting in the chat. A question from someone is, who else, groups, orgs, or individual are lobbying at the state level for natural building materials and processes? Would love for Ben and Sasha to share.
You first, Sasha.
Okay, I think that the groups who have done that probably the most successfully are the like hemp world of hemp building, and I think and I could be wrong about this, but I feel like the reason being that there is actually a profit to be made. There are products that people have, and there are people who, and that's not like a bad thing. It's like, oh, there's an incentive. Let's put money, let's put time into this. And so I feel like they're making a lot more headway than say us, who I've been working on like primarily on the Cobb stuff. Like there ain't no money to be made there. So, um, yeah, so we had some efforts last year trying to get a few different states to adopt. We decided rather than just focusing on Cobb, it was like, well, let's add in the um, light straw clay and hemp lime as well. Just if we're going through the effort of writing letters and speaking at these different hearings and stuff, let's like give the list, not just Cobb. But yeah, I don't know. Ben.
Yeah, yeah, I think like, sorry, angry dog, who hasn't had dinner yet, but then, one moment.
But yeah, I mean, I think that that's a huge piece of all of the like testing and regulations and stuff is that kind of inherently these materials like don't make a profit. And so we don't have that incentive to do the testing, right? We don't have the normal source of funding because there's no one who's like, yeah, hoping to make that profit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a big issue. Like we don't live in a country where public benefit research is funded in most cases. The analogy that was shared with me was, if we discovered that there was a weed that lived in our backyards that was pervasive, that solved some serious disease like cancer without a lot of processing, it would not be the United States that funded the research and testing that got that approved, right? We'd be waiting on the Dutch or something to like develop it and bring it back. So that is a big problem.
There's another question. Sasha, you mentioned using natural materials to support unhoused communities. Can you expand on this? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. What I was specifically speaking to was just sort of taking the concept of unhoused communities into that risk assessment, into the like, here are all of the hazards in, so we look at the hazards in the built environment, and then I was adding into that just the layer of the hazard of the inaccessibility of our housing market. I think, yeah, how using these materials for unhoused community is sort of um a whole other question, and my short answer would be that unless we change our zoning regulations, that feels really hard, and probably the easiest way to use these materials and to do temporary houses is with like mobile tiny homes. That'd be my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. And then there's several questions around like ADUs in various forms. So maybe I can ask a direct one there. So is there a pre-approved plan for straw bale ADU in any city or county? And then maybe you could share more about ADUs in general in relation to a natural building.
I'll leave that one to Ben.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. Yeah.
It's the holy grail.
Yeah. Yeah, no reason it couldn't happen. But among the barriers, so like LA County, their pre-approved ADU plans, they generated them in-house. LADBS, City of Los Angeles, they did like sort of an open call and approved maybe 30 of them or something like that. But we recently asked the questions like, okay, well, if we wanted to create a pre-approved ADU using the standard plan program, like how would we go about doing that? And the answer was let me call you back. We haven't heard back yet. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's important. It can definitely happen. I'm not worried about the regulatory barrier being something that can't be overcome. It's just going to be a money problem. Someone has to um, subsidize the costs because it's going to be more than normal plan check, almost for sure.
Thank you. Another question around insurance. Are there any efforts being made to get California Department of Insurance on board? And also, do insurance companies cover alternative building materials?
I'm not that familiar with that. Anyone here in the audience?
Not familiar of anyone working at the state level around this. I have not heard, at least around earthen masonry, of folks having difficulty with it. What I coach people to say is, like, if you're asked the question is, what is your house made out of? You say masonry and then move on. Because usually, like, that's sort of the level of detail that the actuaries want anyway. They're like, what's your roof made out of? They don't want to know the brand. They just want to know that it's Class A. I have, in New Mexico, I heard stories about problems with insurers, but I don't know enough about like what the substance of the issue was there.
Thank you. Next question. Since earthen techniques use earthen materials are often found on site, what happens if a site doesn't have enough or right kinds of materials to work with? What does that mean for areas like Altadena that now have contaminated soil?
Yeah, I mean, in the places that I have worked where we actually don't have appropriate soils, then I would say, like, that's not the appropriate building material. It's such a heavy material and there's so much energy it takes to move the materials around that if you really have to move them long distances, it's not feasible. In terms of the toxicity in the soil, that is not my area of expertise either, and it feels like it's something that would be really worthwhile for somebody to look more into. And if anyone here in the audience knows anything about that, like, please chime in the chat.
So for someone who's interested in getting a degree in architecture and wants to focus on natural building, is there any tips or things you can speak to?
I am not in the loop about the sort of different universities options right now, but there might be some folks here who do, if you know of anything.
Yeah, there are some schools that have strong design build components. Auburn, Yale, I'm trying to think who else that would be better for that sort of stuff. I mean, I think it's a relatively new thing for any of these materials to be entering into architectural curriculum. Like, I learned a lot about passive solar and that sort of thing, but none of the material stuff when I was in school. And even when I was in grad school, I think any of this would have been considered sort of heretical, which speaks to larger issues, right? But I don't know. I mean, the other thing to think about is that architecture school, and I'm going to get a letter from the AIA about this, but it's a long path. It doesn't pay that well. Unless you're doing commercial buildings, you mostly don't need to be licensed, right? What you need to be is experienced and proficient to do single family homes. So there may be better ways to get the kind of experience that you're looking for, rather than going down that accredited architecture school route that normally leads to licensure. But that's just my 2 cents. I mean, I learned a lot after I had 2 master's degrees by going to New Mexico and taking, classes at Northern New Mexico's Adobe construction program, which was like a 2-year associate's degree, right? And probably more practical information on any of this stuff than I would have learned, even if I got another master's, like,
There's
and like
so
$90
many,
a credit hour. Yeah.
so many great resources just dropped into the chat there. So thanks, everyone. That is awesome.
Yeah, School of Architecture is a good one. I'm just seeing that come up. Those are really interesting people doing good stuff in Arizona.
And I can speak a little, I think specifically around engineering and different universities that are interested in doing engineering around these things. Ben kind of mentioned it, but there are a handful that have of engineering professors at different universities that have a specific interest in these things. So if that's something folks are interested in, you can reach out to. But specifically, yeah, Michelle Barbato out of UC Davis, and then yeah, we've been working with Cal Poly, and then I believe there's another university that Anthony's been working with down in I think San Diego or something. So if folks are interested in the engineering side of it, reach out. Yeah, hear me.
Thank you. There's a question about any recommendations for foundations that support earth and natural building.
Yeah, so there's a rubble trench foundation is now in the code as well. I believe it has a different name. It's called um I'm blanking on the name of what it's called in the code, but it is essentially a rubble trench foundation that was originally popularized by Frank Lloyd Wright back in the day. Very, seismically stable, and when done correctly. And yeah, it's in the also in the ICC now.
Yeah, crushed stone footing is what,
Thank you.
and that can be used for masonry now. Thank you, Anthony Dente.
Thank you. I'll ask one more question, and perhaps could also talk about just coming back to this webinar and how this is a response to the LA wildfires, and yeah, what are the ways forward that you see in this rebuilding and just like building effort with all the loss of homes and with natural building? It's a very general question, I know, but I feel like this is like, a lot of people are curious and want to know like how, what the possibilities are, and what they can do. So it's nice to hear what the actionable steps can be.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some things that everyone can do, like signing the petition, talking to your legislator, your state assembly or person or senator, encouraging them to put pressure on the Building Standards Commission to look harder at these materials. That's a no-brainer, right? I think when it comes to building on the ground here, and Sasha and I were talking about this yesterday, I feel like there's going to be a bunch of different paths. Like there's no one solution that's going to work for everybody. Everybody that needs to rebuild is going to have different priorities and needs. And I think the challenge is just finding that affinity group, like the people that that you're aligned with, because we know that there are going to be some larger scale builders with compressed earth block and that kind of stuff that can build multiple buildings that want to come out here. Cobb, is a much smaller scale enterprise, like better for owner builders and that sort of thing. So I think, try and find your people, I would say first. And then secondly, I would encourage everybody to try and make an alliance and connect with an existing organization as well that already has capacity and some of the administrative stuff. Because I think one of the things that we're all struggling with right now is there's so many different directions to go. Like, we have all the enthusiasm, and now we need like structure and order, unfortunately. And that will go a long way towards making all of our efforts more productive. I'm just trying to talk to everybody I can.
Yeah, I think that also like I know that there are some nuance, but we can build cob sheds in people's burned lots. Let's figure out about the soil contamination. Or make Adobes somewhere else and bring them in and have a really nice, solid. There's a concept in Japan called a kura that is like a fire safe little storehouse. And it's a common thing for people who have wood houses to have a storehouse that doesn't burn. And people are interested in these materials, like that's something that can happen. Also, if you do have a house, but you are just so excited to use these materials, you can do earthen plaster just over your latex paint in your house. And I am working on setting up a workshop. I'm going to be down in the area in the end of May and early June. And we're going to be doing a workshop specifically for that. Just how do you just do earthen plaster over your boring latex paint in your sheetrock, very boring standard house. So that's another thing that people can do like right now. There are so many questions in the chat, and I just want to answer all of them.
I know I'm actually a little overwhelmed by all the questions, and also just like really grateful that folks are connecting with each other and sharing their contacts, and just encouraging people, if you see other folks you're interested in connecting with, please get their contacts in the chat and build coalitions, build community. And speaking of that, I like to hand a little moment over to Earthen Project in LA to speak a little bit about their work.
I think Evelyn is the one representing here. Are you there still? We just invited Evelyn to just speak a little bit about their networking efforts they're doing down in LA.
Yeah, it looks like Evelyn's here. I will ask them to unmute. Oh,
Okay.
Yes.
Amazing. I'm Evelyn. I can't speak too much about the natural building part of things, but I'm helping organize and mobilize a lot of our efforts here in Los Angeles. I think, Ben, you kind of touched on this, and our main goal is to create a standardized design to get it pre-approved by LA City and the county, and offer it for free for now and for the future. But yeah, that's our main goal. We're still setting up the groundwork. We started off as just 4 people, and I feel like every day this network has been growing more and more, which is really beautiful. So thank you both, Sasha and Ben, for being available to speak with us, and obviously sharing your knowledge currently and since forever. But yeah, we're currently setting up a series of workshops that'll take place in Quail Springs in collaboration with the Gabrielino and Tongva Springs Foundation and Jay from the Tongva Conservancy from Altadena. And we hope that through these series of workshops, we'll be able to create a set of guides that will be mutually beneficial and centering educators and Indigenous voices within the process. And afterwards, we hope that will really dictate our design, and we can offer whatever comes out of those conversations to you guys and anyone else interested in applying them. But yeah, it's us, Earthen Project LA. We're on Instagram. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
thank you so much. And we will be sending up a follow-up email after the webinar with resources. And Quail Springs is also having a natural building focus site tour coming up in March. So for people who are interested in the LA area, want to come see an example of different building possibilities with natural materials, you're welcome. I'm going to hand it over to our program director, Erin, to talk about it.
Hello, everyone. I'm the ghost co-host on the side of Dongyi. Thank you so much, Ben and Sasha, for this amazing conversation, and also Evelyn for sharing the work of Earthen Projects. And as Dongyi mentioned, on March 15th, we just wanted to send a save the date out to this group. We're going to be offering a site tour of Quail Springs to view the possibilities of natural building and examples of different building materials, building types, uses, all types of cool stuff. We're located about 2.5 hours north of LA and about 2 hours east of Santa Barbara. If you're not familiar with the Cuyama Valley, it's going to be an all-day tour. We'll be offering a farm fresh lunch and just asking for a sliding scale donation, but no one turned away for lack of funds. And there's going to be an Eventbrite link sent out after, or just in the follow-up email from this webinar. And we just encourage you to sign up if you're interested quickly, since space is limited. But yeah, really hope that we'll see some of your faces there, and offering the space to connect and network in person as well. It's been really incredible, like watching all of your questions and comments pour in the chat. And yeah, it would be amazing to offer Quail Springs virtual space into Quail Springs actual space to yeah, link and build and connect. So thank you. And if you have any questions specifically about the tour, I'll drop my email in the chat. It's just programs@quailsprings.org. But like I said, there'll be follow-up information in the email. So I'll pass it back over to Dongyi.
Y'all are getting the first invite for the tour.
Yes, the first invite. There are still a lot of questions coming in the chat box. But I see there's some recurring questions about the public hearing day. I'm not sure if that was determined already, or if there's one that, Ben, you can mention.
I think Ben said the date isn't set yet.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm looking it up here. I'll put it in the chat as soon as I find it.
okay, great. And we can also attach it to the follow-up email with more information and the petition that Ben is involved in. And I will also
There's
drop,
2 petitions that we'll be sending out links for, right? So there's the one that Ben wrote, and there's another one too that's been getting a lot of great traction.
I'm gonna drop them both in the chat, and for folks to just sign. And yeah, Sasha and Ben, are there any closing remarks you want to offer?
Yeah, I think wow, just seeing that we could talk for hours, and also seeing like so many familiar faces out there, and just like you could all talk for hours too. So I'm hoping that the earth.dev website can just be like a space, like there's a spot for workshops, like please share your workshops that you're offering. We're kind of focusing specifically on like populating it for the LA region first, but it's, it's available for anywhere. And Ben has workshops. I'll let him touch on that. I have workshops I'm involved in. There's a couple that are an online format that are on my website, earthenshelter.com. And then we're doing one in Ojai, a 2-day natural building workshop, earthen wall systems at Mama Tree in Ojai in June. And then, like I said, we're working on setting up a earthen plasters workshop for just like earthen plasters over drywall. So I'm actually super excited about that because I feel like that's just like the easiest way to approach these things. So yeah, so appreciative of you all being here, and so honored too by just like the wealth of knowledge in this group. I feel like in terms of like the question of like, what do we do and how do we move things forward? Like, this is it. It's like people coming together and then people having, you know, oh, my aunt works in policy for blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's the way that this happens truly. So feel free to reach out to me via my website, Earthen Shelter, or Instagram, Earthen Shelter, with other questions too. Happy to continue some of these dialogues. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, ditto to all that. I mean, I think the thing that always strikes me at the end of these type of meetings is that it's really easy if you're in the alternative materials to feel like you're out on an island all by yourself, sort of like screaming into the wind. And it's really encouraging to see so many people that are interested in this stuff. I mean, 110 folks have an enormous potential to make changes, both on the ground and, you know, in the regulatory realm. I just encourage everybody to like stay connected and, you know, take the momentum and energy that you've got and try and, you know, point at a thing and make it happen, because it really, we live in our so-called industry is so tiny, right? And there's so few people doing it that all it takes is one or two people to really make giant transformations, like for the entire community and state, right? So please jump in, help out, and stay connected.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking time out of your evening, and for folks who are on the other side of the world. I'm not sure what time it is, so thank you for coming out. And I want to leave the chat box up a little bit so that people can kind of go through and connect if you need. So feel free to sign off now as we're wrapping up. But I'm gonna keep the Zoom open for a few minutes till 8, so that if you see anyone you want to contact, folks you want to connect with, you can connect together. This is obviously just the beginning. It's really exciting. We had over 160 people in this conversation. A little too big to have an open dialogue. Apologies for that. So it would be great in the future to have more intimate, like, working groups, or, you know, specific location groups that hope you can form from joining this webinar. So thank you again so much, and have a good evening.